If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 58, with real estate investor, agent, and unschooling mom of three, Erika Brown. Today is February 22nd, 2022.
You'll be surprised how just our upbringing and our experiences have really held us back from believing in ourselves and from taking risks. So I first work on your mindset. What do you need to do to be able to be in a place where you can begin to take risks, where you can begin to be decisive, where you can begin to really believe in yourself and bet on yourself?
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I'm a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please take a couple minutes to go into Apple Podcasts if you're listening from an Apple device, to rate and review the podcast. If you appreciate the free resources that are provided in this podcast, then the best way to let me know is to do just that. Reviews help the podcast be more visible, and it helps other dreamers discover the podcast. So thank you. I appreciate you. And now let's get back to today's episode. Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth, and I am so thankful that you've decided to tune in for today's episode with real estate investor Erika Brown. Erika Brown was working a 9-to-5 as a banker until she decided that she wanted more freedom, and she started a side hustle as a real estate agent. Shortly after, she became a real estate investor, and in 5 years, she has built a multi-million-dollar portfolio owning 38 units. So today she walks us through her journey as a real estate investor, the different options that you have to become an investor, even if you don't have a lot of money to put down, and so much more. Here is Erika Brown. Erika Brown, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Oh man, I do a lot of things. I'm a wife, a mom, multiple business owner. I primarily work in real estate here in Atlanta. I actually am a co-founder of a brokerage, and I also have a team of agents. I'm also a coach. I coach other people all over, not just Atlanta, how to invest in real estate. I have a real estate portfolio right now. As we're recording, I'm closing on a 20-unit deal tomorrow. So probably when this comes out, I'll be at 38 units in 5 years. And I homeschool my kids. I do a lot of things.
I have so many questions. So you just said you acquired 38 units in 5 years while homeschooling your kids.
For 3 of those 5 years, yes.
And you co-own a brokerage firm as well.
Yes.
How did you even get started in real estate?
5 years ago, I was working in the banking industry. I was on the corporate 9-to-5 track. I had started out in sales in branch banking and then as a banker, and ended up getting promoted to become a manager. shortly afterwards. And I thought that that would be the company I retired from. I mean, that was my goal, was to retire from corporate. It was not to be an entrepreneur whatsoever. I started hitting this feeling like, okay, I have a young kids at the time. I really desire to have freedom, what that grind is like. You having to choose between this call and this school activity and feeling guilty because you weren't able to make a parent-teacher conference or something like that. So I kept running into that and really just desiring to just have more freedom and just being able to have more flexibility, ultimately to be able to be with my kids more. And so I started applying for jobs that did not require me to be in person, more of like remote work, more flexible, non-customer, everyday facing positions. And it would be so crazy. Like I would have recommendations from the best people I could. And I had my manager talk to the hiring manager. I mean, just the perfect scenario time after time. And then I would not get the job time after time. So eventually you have to sit there and figure out, okay, is God trying to tell me something? Is he like closing this door for a reason? And at the time in my personal life, I had just decided to move to this neighborhood in Atlanta. And I moved here with 4 other friends. It was a neighborhood that was transitional. It wasn't even up and coming at the time. Most people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're moving there by choice kind of neighborhood. And moved there and we were loving it. It was a lot of perceptions that weren't true. And then we were just having a great time. So just out of like a natural reaction to just really love where I live, I began like telling all my friends about it and keeping up with the real estate market and being like, hey, I've seen this house for sale. You should come and check it out. And literally driving my friends around the neighborhood and then passing them on to the local real estate agent. And then I look up and it's like, wait, I have sent her 10 houses. That is $100,000. I could have made 6 figures. So I am making pretty much almost 6 figures at the job I'm at, but I'm working so much. And I'm just like, wait, this doesn't make sense. I just passed on $100,000 worth of income. Maybe we're onto something here. And then that is what led to the interest in real estate from there.
So you basically started your journey as a real estate investor, actually as a real estate agent.
Yes. And because I worked at a bank, I was at the second wealthiest branch in Atlanta. So most of my clients were very rich. And because I'm a natural, curious person, I'm always asking questions like, how did you get your wealth? How are you able to take all these vacations? How are you able to take all this time off? I just learned, I don't even think I knew the concept of investing. Even though I worked at the bank, you would think I would, but I didn't. And so I learned this concept of investing and investing for freedom by just asking questions to my really rich clients. And I figured out, wow, all these people, whether they are this high income earning executive or they're this business owner, they all own real estate. And then that just keeps my curiosity from there.
And so were you kind of doing this as a side hustle at first, or what was your strategy?
And so I got my real estate license. I knew I wanted to eventually become an investor. I knew that I wanted to do some sort of community development where I would be able to provide jobs and things like that, but I wasn't sure how. So I figured, let me just get my license and we'll figure it out from there. So I got my license the winter of 2015. And at the time I had my license. Also, I was managing a team of 13 people, and that did not last long. Real estate market was doing really good. I had clients because, again, I had pretty much already built a network without even intentionally building a network. I had clients waiting to work with me. So I'm running back and forth, trying to be a mom, trying to be a wife, trying to manage a team, plus do this real estate side hustle thing. And eventually I just had to bet on myself and say, you know what? I know this job is cushy. I know I'm the breadwinner of my household, but you know what? I got to believe in myself. I have already done a few deals. And I think that if I can allocate my time to this full time, that I can even do better and invest really fast. And so I quit my 9-to-5 after trying to do my side hustle for 3 or 4 months. My goal was to have all this money saved up. I didn't. We consolidated credit card debt. We paid off our debt consolidation loan. So we were able to do that. And we may have had a month's worth of living expenses, but we had a lot of hustle. So I was like, look, we're going to make it work. And so I quit. And in that same year, a part of my 401k to use as a down payment for our first investment property, because I knew I got to have some type of passive income coming really fast. I cannot depend on the real estate market sales or whatever. So
you said so many interesting things just now. So you said you were the breadwinner and you made the decision to take the leap. And at that point, you had about a month of living expenses saved up. And you also said that you took money from your 401k. So did you take a loan or what did you do
I cashed it out. Yep, I cashed it out.
And you take
once I left.
You paid the penalty and everything.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. And I think it goes to show again that personal finance is very personal. You hear the typical advice will tell you, don't do this, don't do that. But it looks like in your specific situation, it worked out because here you are 5 years later with 38 properties.
Yeah.
Okay, this woman built a 38 unit portfolio in 5 years. I think the second thought is probably, yeah, she was balling. So that's how she did it. But then you said that you weren't earning six figures. You were close to it. So talk to us more about how you did it.
Yeah. So first of all, no, I came from a lower middle class family. My parents grew up extremely poor. I mean, my dad picked cotton and my mom grew up in a 2-room house in the country and she didn't have a bathroom until she was 18. We did not have any type of generational wealth whatsoever. And I grew up where we did own our house, but we had what we needed. It wasn't a ton of extra type of thing. And so whenever I bought my first house, which was really the beginning of my investing journey, I had a 580 credit score and I had to borrow $3,000 from my dad to buy the house. So I made almost six figures, but because we are a family of 5 and we live in a major city like Atlanta, we were still living paycheck to paycheck. It was not a lavish life kind of thing.
And so you get the $3,000 from your dad to buy your first. So did you live in that first property?
So we purchased our first property and we used the FHA loan. And so we lived in the house, but we, again, just, I guess, not growing up with a lot teaches you how to be resourceful. The house had a basement. And so we knew like, okay, we can actually use that basement to help us. So we renovated the basement and we began renting out a room in the basement.
So you were house hacking.
House hacking, but we were just being resourceful. In the beginning of our house hacking journey, we bought our first house and we renovated the house with a loan. We took out a loan to renovate the loan, the FHA, called Renovation 203K loan. So we used that and we rented out the basement. And at first we used the money that we made in the basement to pay towards childcare because there were points where we had 3 kids in childcare and it was very expensive. It was more than our mortgage. So we used that to offset that. And then once all the kids were in some form of school, then we began using that extra money towards savings and actually creating financial stability in our life through that opportunity to house hack with our first house.
When you made the jump from your full-time job to real estate agent, how was that first year for you as a real estate agent?
It was very rough. I was with my previous employer for 9 years. When you're doing something for a long time, you become the expert. So it doesn't take as long. You learn the ins and outs of it. And so I was transitioning to something that I really didn't know anything about. And so anytime you're doing that, there's a huge learning curve and it takes you longer and you make mistakes, working a lot more. I really had to have a lot of conversations with my family to make sure they were on the same page with like, okay, I know it's rough now, but this is the goal and this is where we're going. It was really important to have a supportive environment.
Aside from the expense, saving up expenses to prepare to leave your job, can you maybe talk about some of the things that you did that made you realize that you were ready to take that leap?
Well, I think when you have a side business or a side hustle and you are working towards leaving your 9 to 5, there are a few things that it's important to have. And for me, it was one, I really wanted to not have any consumer debt. I really didn't want to go into this risk or leap of faith, having to pay 20 and 30% interest credit cards. It's really important that you can try to get rid of consumer debt as much as you can. And then also I developed a network. I had a sphere of influence. So I had a pipeline And I think the corporate environment actually helped prepare me for being a business owner because it taught me discipline. I had hustle. I had disciplines in place to wake up early and get things done, email etiquette, and just certain things, professionalism that I learned in that environment that helped prepare me from being a business owner. Yeah. And I think having a mentor, having someone that you can call and just pick their brain and have access to so you don't feel like you're just out there alone winging it in life. Those were all the things that helped me to feel confident in taking that leap.
So you left your job with a month of living expenses. You went full-time as a real estate agent. I think probably some listeners are thinking, okay, so that first year, she must have made like hundreds of thousands of dollars because that's the only way she has 38 units now. So help me connect the dots here. How did you buy that first property?
5 or 6 years ago. And so the real estate market was much lower than it is now. So that's that. I was definitely selling. I did okay. I did really good for a first year agent, find properties. I had an investor client. Somehow I connected with him and he was like, hey, you're a new agent. You got a lot of time. You don't have a ton of clients. I'm looking to invest in real estate. So I want you to drive around and find the vacant houses and research who own them and see if you can reach out to them and see if you can find me some deals. And I was like, great. I ran across this portfolio. I was doing this in a particular area, and I noticed that there was 10 or 15 houses that were owned by the same LLC. So I was like, okay, let me just, instead of just kind of doing this one-off, let me just find out who manages this and call them. And this asked me to send the whole list. So I found the phone number and I said, hey, I noticed that you guys own a ton of property in Atlanta. Can you just send me your portfolio? And they send me everything, even properties that weren't in that neighborhood. And again, I'm looking for my client. I'm looking for properties for him to invest. But I asked him, I said, hey, I actually would like to buy just one property myself. If I find one home that I actually like, can I buy that separately outside portfolio? And they were like, sure. And they were like, well, move fast because we actually haven't done appraisals. But if you can submit an offer before we do the appraisals, then you may get a deal. So some people, they try to bulldog people and run over them. And you will win in life by just being nice to people. Just becoming friends with people will actually win you a lot more opportunities in life versus trying to run over people. And so we just made fast friends. And I placed an offer. I found this house and I was like, okay, this is right around the corner from where I live. This is about this development that's happening. Let me try to engage this. So I submitted an offer. They accepted. The offer was for $60,000. Again, these numbers, it was an up and coming neighborhood, but I knew that property, the Atlanta Beltline, was right next door, but they didn't know that, but I knew. So I put an offer on it. And we used the 20% down, which was like $23,000. So we used a part of my 401k as down payment. And because I didn't have a job anymore, so I'm essentially like, lenders are not going to give me any money because I just quit my job, but my husband did. We put down the 20%. And the great thing about the property was previously, it had been a Section 8 rental. And because it was Section 8, it had to be kept up to certain standards. So it didn't need a lot of renovations. We just did cosmetic enhancements. And after we did that, we used more money and put $10,000 down towards updating the cosmetic and furnishing the house. And I had just heard about this Airbnb. I hadn't actually even used it myself, but I had heard about this concept called Airbnb. And so we put the property on Airbnb and made $35,000 our first year.
Wow. So you do both short-term and long-term rental?
I do everything. We're very diverse in our rental portfolio. We have Airbnb, we have travel nurses, which are both of our short-term rentals. We have your traditional long-term fair market tenant, and then we also do Section 8 housing as well. And I've done veteran voucher programs.
So for someone who is thinking about real estate, is one of those easier to get started with, or?
I always tell my students, like, it really depends on your margin, your financial situation, and the location of the property. All those conditions help determine the type of investing you should do with the property. If you want to do just easy peasy, not a lot of personal time into it, I would say that's a long-term traditional tenant and you hire a property manager. And there are people that build wealth over time for that strategy. Absolutely so. It's super possible.
Is there anything that you have learned? I'm sure there's more than one thing, but anything that stands out to you that you've learned about real estate investing that you wish you had known when you first started?
Oh man, absolutely. So I shared the story of how we bought our first investment property. We saved up, we put 20% down, and then we did that 3 more times. Eventually, after I got a mentor, after I began educating myself a little bit more, I realized, wait, there are other ways that you can scale up, buy more properties without using my money. Because when we were at property, maybe like 4 or 5, it's like, this is great. We have good cash flow coming in, but man, we're missing all the deals. I remember we were under contract for our second investment property, and it was a friend who actually becoming a contractor, and he was like, I'm going to try and flip this house. I'm going to sell it. And I was like, well, maybe we'll buy it. And then that's kind of how that happened. But we were under contract with him. And again, we hustling, selling houses and stashing money. And we had stashed another $20,000 to put as a down payment for this next investment property. It was my husband's, one of his frat brothers called him and was like, hey, I have this opportunity. I have this property. You can buy it in this neighborhood. It's also on the west side of Atlanta. And it's like, you can buy it for $20,000, but I need to know tomorrow.
Did you say 20,000?
$20,000. This was 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But he was like, I need to know as soon as possible. I just looked, I was like, dang, this money that we currently have in our savings is earmarked for this next property. And I said, no, I didn't even look at any other opportunities. I didn't try to refi. I said no. And he sold to someone else. And a year later, that home resold for over $300,000.
So you were going to tell me 100,000.
No, girl, $300,000. Of course, it was renovated, but they bought it for 20. They probably put 100 into it. So they made a lot of money. Wow. And so that was a big aha moment for me that woke me up and said, you know, I'm never going to be in that situation again. There was a lot of things that I learned from that. I learned, one, I'm never going to only have $20,000. I think to really what that taught me is you got to figure out how to do this. You have to figure out how to scale. You're going to do this seriously. You need to find some real mentorship, someone that can really help you to do this seriously. And then I need you to figure out how to use other people's money to invest so you can keep your money and continue to grow. And that's what I do now. If I would have learned that ahead of time, I probably would have had 100 units by now. I would have been multimillionaire versus 2 millionaire right now, is by having that knowledge up front.
Back then, when you had the opportunity to buy that property for $20,000 and you said no, what would you have done differently?
Oh, girl, I would have done so many things. One, I mean, I guess my first easiest thing is I could have sought out an unconventional lender. I have access to what we call hard money lenders. I have where you can get short-term financing to purchase a property. The interest rates are higher, but they are basically for investors to be able to purchase homes short-term to then either sell them or later refinance them after they renovate them. Or I would have just called a friend, called a rich friend. Hey, let me borrow $20,000 and I can pay you back $25,000 in a few months. Something. I would have definitely not said no. I would have said yes and then figured it out. And that's what I do now.
So now you have a network of hard money lenders and you have all those resources. But for someone who's new into this real estate world, how can they find potential lenders outside if they don't have any rich friends?
If you have opportunity where you do know someone that is an investor and hopefully they are the type of investor who they are helpful, they want to help people, then you engage that. If you don't have that, then you seek out someone like me who has a paid mentorship program that can offer you the same opportunities for a formal relationship. So I have students now right here in Atlanta. We have a mutual friend that we talked about yesterday where I've connected her with my lender, contractor, et cetera. And it's not just in Atlanta. I have students in Dallas, in Arkansas, in California that I've connected with people as well. And that's a formal relationship. So I say, if you have that internal network, don't be afraid. Ask them. If you don't have it, you could hire someone like me that could provide it for you at a cost.
For people who are ready to get started, how much do you need to put down to be able to secure an unconventional loan?
If you decide to go the private loan route, Generally, it's between 5 to 15%. Is generally for new investors, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. It just depends on your scenario. So there are different ways to invest that I wasn't aware of. You have ways where you can buy your first home and you can buy it as an owner occupant and you can get all of the amazing low interest rates, low down payments. We even have clients that take advantage of 100% financing where they come to closing, they don't have to put down anything, but you move into it and you live there for 1 year. Live there for a year. And then guess what? You go into this with a strategy. And then after 1 year, you go and buy another one. And that home becomes a rental property. And you are strategically buying in places that are appreciating in value that are also good for future rental income. So that's one strategy. There are other strategies like you can take advantage of if, say, you don't want to move. Like we were in a position where we did not want to move, kids and life and stuff like that. You can take advantage of a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan, and you can stay in your current home, but then use your equity to help you put down as a down payment on another home without using your cash. Mm-hmm. That's another thing I wasn't aware of at the time. So I teach all different strategies depending on the person's customized personal finance scenario. Mm-hmm. So there are all sorts of ways that you can invest without having to put down the standard 20% out of your own money, your own savings.
So for any of the dreamers listening, just ready to get started, becoming real estate investors, what are the next few steps that they can take to get started?
I think the first step before just jumping into reaching out to a mentor or reaching out to a person like me, or even going and buying a house, contacting a real estate agent, it's to really focus on their mindset. I always say, like, there's a really great book. It's a classic, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's one of my cohort program recommendations. It's to work on your mindset. You'll be surprised how just our upbringing and our experiences have really held us back from believing in ourselves and from taking risks. So I first work on your mindset. What do you need to do to be able to be in a place where you can begin to take risks, where you can begin to be decisive, where you can begin to really believe in yourself and bet on yourself, like you talk about. Then next, find your community. Who are the people around you that are doing this, that are willing to help you? Whether it's online, I've paid for community sometimes in certain situations, or it may be a friend that you know. And then while you're in that community, ask them, what are they learning? How can you invest in the knowledge that you need to grow? And then once you have some basic knowledge, you found your community, then I think it's good to then begin investing. And a mentor should be able to walk you through, this is the best step that works for you, for your specific scenario. So mindset first, getting your mind right and open to new opportunities, taking risks, being decisive. And this real estate market is fast. You don't have time to be asking 11 people 50,000 questions. You will miss out on opportunities, okay? Which misses out on your future freedom. Now, I just came back from being off a month. I decided to take off work for a whole month. Nothing stopped. My bills were not paid. The direct deposit still hit. But that's because of future investment in the past, of making decisions and being decisive and doing all the things that it requires to be successful. So I'll get off my soapbox.
So what has, and you touched on that a little bit, but what has investing in real estate done for your life?
It has really helped me to see opportunities that I never thought that we would have access to. Mm. We as in Black women, as in Black people. I mean, it just opened up a whole nother world just through the ability to be able to pause and think and not just survive. It's opened up opportunities for me to, even with my kids, I homeschool my kids, and you don't have to have wealth to homeschool. But for me, this helped me because I wasn't stuck in the grind. I wasn't so caught up in the rat race. It helped me to be able to pause and to actually be confident in my ability to teach my own kids. I take my mom on vacation. Every time we go on vacation, I'm like, Mama, your plane ticket, let's go. She coming. And other things, like I said, we took a month off. Or this year we have like a few vacations this year that I'm not worried about how much things cost. We're able to have a cleaner, I have a whole team. It's a village. I'm able to provide lots of jobs and opportunities for at least 20 to 25 people in my life because of the wealth that we've been able to build. So it's a beautiful thing, and it gives people hope and inspiration that they can experience something different for their life as well. So it's been really great.
Tell me about your decision to unschool your kids. Well, first of all, what's the difference between homeschooling and unschooling?
Right. So unschooling is a form of homeschooling. You have, so say you just have traditional school and you have all these different ways you can do traditional school. You have private school, you have public school, you have charter school. It's like that. So you have homeschool is like the big overarching concept, and you have these other types of specific ways you can homeschool. I do what's called unschooling. So unschooling just basically means that we don't have a structured form of like curriculum that we follow, but that we actually learn through experiencing life. And so it's a different concept, but it really isn't different. It's really how we learned as a society before the new modern age of school was introduced to us. So before, I think school as the concept that we know of today has only been around since the early 1900s. Before that, you lived with your family and you learned how to read, you learned how to count, and just by living through life, by working with your family or whatever that was. And so it's essentially the same concept like that.
That's very interesting. Well, Erika, I'd like to end the interview with the round of rapid fire questions.
All right.
Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
I referred to Rich Dad Poor Dad earlier. It's definitely a classic that I would suggest. There's this other book that really helped to transition me from the corporate, I'll tell you what to do mindset to more of a creative business owner mindset. It's a book called Vivid Vision. It encourages you to actually close your eyes and envision your future without boundaries. I feel like sometimes because of our culture's oftentimes limited exposure to things that we don't know, we can't even allow our vision to grow because we don't know what we don't know. And so that book helped to open me up to dream bigger and to really let my artificial guards down that I built up. Be like, oh, I can't do that. There's no way I can add that to my vision. I can't do that. I can't do that. And it helps you to put that down and to really create a 5-year, 10-year, 3-year plan for your business based on this vivid vision versus just based on what you think you can do based on your experience.
What's one thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self?
I think that the money I have is not my last. There's no reason to control it, want to hoard over it. You're smart and you can make more of it. So let's focus on having an abundance mindset versus having a scarcity mindset. That's one thing I would tell myself.
What's the best investment in yourself you've made so far?
Joining the club that we're in, this Rachel Rogers Hello 7 Club. I think that's definitely been one of the most profitable in lots of different ways investment, because I definitely I'm a self-taught person. I'll read a book, I'll listen to a podcast, I'll talk to someone. I'm a very much so empowered self-taught person. So for me to actually pay for investment was something that took me a long time to do, but man, it's been so worth it.
Filling the blank in 3 words or less. Money to me is
a river. It should continue to flow. It shouldn't be like a lake where it's like still. And so that's why I love real estate, because it's passive investments. It's always flowing like a river.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be where people feel like, man, I think I can do whatever I thought it was I couldn't do because I seen her try to do it. That's what I want my legacy to be. I want it to be normalized that Black women are smart or savvy, and we can do anything that we decide we want to do without having to compromise to do it.
Love it. So, Erika, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. Please tell the Dreamers where to find you.
Oh my gosh, this is so great. So thank you so much for having me. You can find me. I am on Instagram a lot at Erika B Investor. You can also find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I show my unschooling life plus in real estate. And that is Erika B, Owning It and Living It. And you can just check out my website at www.erikab.co.
All right. Thank you. All right, everybody. That was Erika Brown. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Last week, we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the podcast where I shared top lessons that I learned over the past year. If you haven't listened to it, please make sure to check it out. It's episode 57. Coming up next week on the podcast, we'll talk about how to live a rich life by intention with Angie and RJ. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers Podcast. You can find the episode show notes and all of the links mentioned at dreamoflegacy.com. If you liked today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the podcast to help the podcast gain more visibility. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to tag me at thedreamers.podcast on Instagram and let me know what you liked about today's episode. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Dreamino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Dreamino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.